Hello YouTube, Salivate Metal here with another very interesting article from the Numismatist. Referred to me by Mr. Baggins. This article is about the man behind coin grading. That's right, William Herbert Sheldon. And this particular article talks about the psychologist and the creator of the well-known grading system and how he led an eventful life that was marred by controversy. Very interesting indeed. So getting into this, every numismatist is familiar with, or at least has heard of, the Sheldon grading scale, the standard numeric system for measuring the qualitative condition of collectible coins. Few, however, are acquainted with the man responsible for its development, William Herbert Sheldon, who lived from 1898 to 1977, as well as some of his other numismatic accomplishments that highlighted his diverse and active life. Although Sheldon was most notably recognized for his contributions to the science of numismatics, he was, by way of formal education and training, equally if not more so renowned for his work in the field of psychology. Sheldon was born on November 19, 1898, in Warwick, Rhode Island, to parents who descended from prominent New England families. His father, William Herbert Sheldon Sr., thrived as a well-to-do businessman until he was bilked out of most of his savings by an unscrupulous business partner. Fortunately, the elder Sheldon was as industrious and involved in a multitude of activities as he was talented in a variety of outdoor skills, which included farming, fishing, gardening, hunting, marksmanship, and raising livestock, so-called living off the land skills that the younger Sheldon acquired at an early age. Eventually, his naturalist upbringing would adequately prepare Sheldon for a position as an ornithologist for the state of Rhode Island. However, there was one indoor activity that sparked his interest well before he reached adolescence, regularly examining his father's old wooden cigar box filled with early American copper cents his family had accumulated over generations. The United States became involved in World War I right after Sheldon was able to complete his Bachelor of Arts degree at Brown University. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant and served as a machine gun company officer in France. And then we see a photo of William Sheldon. Still in Europe, at the war's end, Sheldon met Ernst Kretschmer and Sigmund Freud, two of the most influential figures in the developing field of psychoanalysis. At the time, he was undecided about his career path. Sheldon's contact with these men, made possibly largely through his association with his godfather, the highly revered American psychologist and philosopher William James, certainly became some inspiration. He eventually received a bachelor's degree in 1919. After traveling through the American West and enrolling in a postgraduate student at the University of Colorado, he earned a master's degree in English and eventually a doctorate in psychology studies from the University of Chicago in 1926. As a student, Sheldon became preoccupied with the theory that individual human behavior and ultimately fate were to a great extent determined by a person's somatotype. In other words, their physique. He believed this so strongly that he developed a classification method of identifying an individual's characteristics: endomorphic, portliness; mesomorphic, muscularity; and ectomorphic, slenderness, using a numeric evaluation process. Sheldon encountered almost as many critics, some of whom insisted he was merely a quack, as he did supporters. Before long, he began teaching a branch of what often is referred to as somatotype in constitutional psychology at the University of Chicago, where he eventually completed his medical degree in 1933. While on a 2-year fellowship in Europe following medical school, Sheldon studied under iconic psychology and psychiatry field experts, among them Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. During a tour of Great Britain, he frequently met with members of the intelligentsia, such as Aldous Huxley. And we see here this photo here. Despite criticism of his work in sematotyping, Sheldon taught the discipline to students at the University of Chicago. They're pictured here. Upon returning to the United States in 1938, Sheldon accepted a professorship at Harvard University. Soon thereafter, however, his peacetime pursuits and research were interrupted by the outbreak of World War II. By 1942, Major William Sheldon was fulfilling a stint as an aviation medicine researcher at a Texas military installation, the U.S. Army Medical Corps. However, he received a medical discharge as a lieutenant colonel with 100% disability benefits well before the conflict had ended because he was diagnosed with lymphatic cancer that, in the case, was miraculously proved curable. Interesting indeed. So, yeah, we're learning so far that he was able to create this classification system of endomorph, mesomorphic, and ectomorphic. And I think that kind of was the beginning, the genesis of what would later become the coin grading system. So moving along here, we see that a lengthy preoccupation allowed Sheldon time to nurture his interest in early American copper cents. And he began documenting the various die and strike varieties. Dissatisfied with the existing adjectival grading system, Sheldon applied his numerical system, originally devised for examining his behavioral, physical, and typological characteristics of his patients, and extended it to classifying varying gradations of quality for circulated and mint state cents. This scale, according to Sheldon's explanation, was intended to be a reflection of the relative value of a 1794 large cent, which was then worth $1 in Basel state, which means poor, and $70 in uncirculated MS-70, ranging from 1, the lowest, to number 70, the highest grade. The system incorporated a more refined and precise method of determining the condition of circulating 1-cent pieces by denoting them with grades 1 through 58. The narrower sub-range, which referred to mint state specimens struck in limited quantities, consisted of grades 60 through 70. In due time, the method attained universal acceptance for its more discerning and scientific approach, and its eventual application in the grading of all other types of U.S. coins became the standard among numismatists. Sheldon eventually assembled as many as 3 extensive sets of early large cents dated from 1793 to 1814. The first reportedly was sold privately in 1932, the proceeds of which financed his education. The second was auctioned by Stax in 1938, and the third, which consisted of a complete presentation of all 295 known varieties, excluding the edge examples, was parted out to former associates and colleagues after his death in 1977. Sheldon's first widely promoted numismatic work, Early American Cents, 1793 to 1814, an exercise of descriptive classification with tables of rarity and value, was completed and published in 1949 while he was serving as a director of the Constitution Clinic at Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York City. The book had been written with as much enthusiasm and rigor and due diligence as his projects and dissertations pertaining to psychology. Sheldon became an authority on what soon grew into an increasingly thriving pastime for many, especially those who bought and read his text. As one biographer wrote, "It would be a mistake to ignore this book as simply an indication of Sheldon's hobbies, since it was the first truly comprehensive study of its kind." With the assistance of 2 other noted numismatic scholars, Dorothy Pascal and Walter Breen, Sheldon also published a comprehensive revision of his work in 1958, now titled Penny Whimsy. Interest in early American large cents spread, and a fraternity of avid collectors quickly developed. In 1967, Sheldon founded the first organization devoted specifically to the study of this numismatic subject, the Early American Coppers, EAC, and he became its first member of record. The club's official bi-monthly publication, Pennywise, now it's issued quarterly, featured articles and commentaries written not only by Sheldon, but also by prominent collectors and numismatic scholars such as Breen, Roger Cohen Jr., Howard Newcomb. Currently, the EAC has more than 1,200 registered members across the country and remains among the most respected organizations for its work in promoting interest in a very important facet of the hobby. So here we're going to get into some of the controversies. Sheldon's life as a numismatic scholar bloomed. His work as a medical practitioner and experimentalist became riddled with controversies and even castigation. He had his idiosyncrasies and temperaments and was known to frequently antagonize those with whom he disagreed. His relationships, especially with women who he had been involved with, both intimately and professionally, were often brief and contentious. Twice married and divorced with no children, he clung to the belief that women had their place in society and that they should have limited involvement, if any, in what were regarded as male-dominated pursuits. While preparing the first of several membership dinner meetings of the EAC, which took place in New York Hilton in December '67, Sheldon formally requested that the members' wives not attend. Barbara Honeyman Heath, a clinical research assistant at Sheldon's for many years, became known as an outspoken critic of his work in the field of somatotyping, publicly proclaiming that he was an outright fraud. Others have questioned his ethics of the nude photographs he took of his subjects. There also were allegations that he expressed intensive anti-Semitic opinions and had great admiration for George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder of the American Nazi Party. However repulsive and unbecoming it was for a man of his education and stature to hold such views, it should be noted that it was somewhat fashionable for influential people to express our prejudgmental sentiments as part of a conscious attempt to dispel notions of their having overly liberal and racially tolerant views, particularly during a time when McCarthyism was prevailing. Most reviling was particularly for some members of the numismatic community was the claim that Sheldon's privileged access to materials at the American Numismatic Society's cabinet resulted in some missing coins. Interesting. However, a direct link between him and alleged theft at the organization was never entirely proven. Nonetheless, accusations of Sheldon's involvement in the incident persist to this day. Some were so offended by his alleged misdeeds that they proposed boycotting his coin grading scale and asserted that it never should have been promoted, but offered no suggestions for alternative methods. While Sheldon's legacy relating to both numismatics and psychology no doubt were tainted with disrepute, distrust, inapproprieties, and notoriety, third-party numismatic certification services have extolled the Sheldon grading scale as an indispensable component of their mission to uphold integrity in the rare coin marketplace. And it certainly is an entrenched grading scale for sure. After I found out about the history of the actual scale itself and what was behind it, the fact that, it was based off of a dollar value of these large cents, it certainly made me wonder why it was still being used to this day. It's entrenched. It's what people know. It's what they're familiar with. When they think of everybody knows what an AU-58 is, and why there's no AU-59, and and that type of thing. So it's quite fascinating indeed, and interesting, and it's interesting to hear about Mr. Sheldon and his shortcomings. So post your thoughts below what you think of this man, the man behind the coin grading system. Again, thank you to Baggins for this information, and I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching, and encourage you to please rate, comment, and subscribe.